to everybody. Welcome to all the members and welcome to any of our viewers watching this meeting being streamed live tonight. I'd like to start the meeting by calling for any apologies.
Yes, Chair, we just have apologies from Councillor Kevin Mitchell.
Thank you. Can I ask, is it John, will you be doing the roll call for attendance?
I will be, Chair. So
Sharon, can you do the roll call for attendance? And the answer is present if you're here.
Lovely, thank you very much. Can I just check, ask the councillors who are in attendance to state you are present when I call your name? Councillor Bialik.
Present.
Councillor Fall.
Present.
Councillor Gussain.
Present.
Councillor Harvey.
Present.
Councillor Morse.
Present.
Councillor Pearson.
Present.
Councillor Williams.
Present.
Councillor Wright.
Present.
Councillor Wood.
Present.
Councillor Sutton.
Present.
We all have enough councillors, and just check if Councillor Ledbetter, as the opposition leader, is here at the moment. I don't think he has. In that case, Chair, can I ask for officers in attendance to also state that you are present when I call your name? Chief Executive and Growth Director Kareem Hassan.
Present.
Director Bindu Arjun.
Present.
Director David Bartram.
Present.
Director John Paul Hedge.
Present.
Director Joe Yelland.
Present.
City Solicitor Baban Al-Kafarji.
Present.
Chief Finance Officer David Hodgson.
Present.
Corporate Manager Democratic and Civic Support John Street.
Present.
Service Lead Housing Tenancy Services Lawrence Blake.
Present.
Service Lead Housing Assets Adrian Pengelly.
Present.
Project Officer City Development Jean Marshall.
Present.
Principal Project Manager Jill Day.
Present.
George Marshall from the guest team.
Present.
And myself, Sharon Sissons, and Howard Bassett as Democratic Services Officer in support of the meeting.
Thank you, Sharon.
We are caught to proceed with the meeting, Chair.
Right, thank you, Sharon. And it's just as well we're on Zoom because we all wouldn't get in the Wren's room, would we? So item 3 is the declarations of interest. This is for members. If you have any pecuniary interests within any of the items, you should declare accordingly. With regard to item 4, this is for matters to be taken as part 2. Items 18, 19 and 20 will be taken in part 2. Item 17 will be dealt with in part 1, 6 in any event. So moving on to the minutes of the meeting of the June the 2nd. Are you agreeable that I sign those as a true record? If anybody is against, can you please indicate no, please? No? So in the absence, I'll move that as moved that we sign those minutes, and I'll sign them at the appropriate time. Thank you. Moving on to item 5, public questions. We have one public question here from Peter Cleesby. Mr. Cleesby, are you here and would you like to ask your question, please?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Well,
We can,
yes,
Mr. Cleesby.
Peter.
Right, okay. Question coming. What was the total expenditure, including an estimate of staff time costs, on the tendering exercise, including preparatory studies for the new leisure operator contract? Ends.
Thank you, Peter. The operator procurement process has been running for a number of years, initially as an exercise for St Sibbald's Point before expanding to cover the whole leisure portfolio. The tender process for the new operator has in itself been only a proportion of the total spend. The majority of the spend has been on ensuring an operator focus in the design decisions in relation to the St Simples project, and latterly in developing the estate strategy for the whole leisure portfolio, which is essential work that holds the council in good stead going forward. The total cost has been £555,106, ignoring accounting costs this year, and has been fully funded from the new homes bonus, not the council taxpayer. Thank you, that's it.
Thank you, Chair. If I may just have a follow-up.
Supplementary to my answer, yes.
Supplementary to your answer, absolutely. Given that you've now taken the decision to insource the operation of the leisure services, and that's been welcomed enthusiastically by senior councillors, including yourself and Councillor Pearson at the Strategic Services Committee last week, do you have any thoughts on whether that was actually a good way of spending over £500,000?
Well, I anticipated this sort of reply, Peter, and I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't. I'm urged to bring it back in-house, and then when I bring it back in-house, there is a degree of, if you don't mind me saying, of criticism. At the end of the day, we haven't actually made that decision yet. The executive hopefully will pass the recommendations in a moment, and then I hope it will be fully supported at the full council on the 21st of July. One of our considerations will be bringing those staff over on 2P onto council terms and conditions. One could argue, was that the best thing to do or to be doing? But that is something we intend to do, Peter. And you could ask me a question about that. How much will that cost? But it is doing the right thing. I've made it clear since I was elected leader, if I need to change my mind, and I see nothing wrong in changing minds or changing a policy for the betterment for the city. I would like to think you would admire that and not want to criticise it, and I'm not suggesting you are. But we intend to do the right things for the city in the long term. It was a lot of money. That was where we were. This is where we are. We must now make a brave decision, and hopefully the executive will do that in a few moments' time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just for the record, no criticism was intended. It was a simple, straightforward question, and personally, I support your decision to bring him in-house.
Thank you. I look forward to reading all those compliments in the Exeter Observer, Peter. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot.
And now we will move on to item 6, which is post-pandemic recovery of the leisure services, which goes on from this one. And I will ask Councillor Pearson, please, to move the recommendations, following which Director Joe Yellen will then speak to the paper. Councillor Pearson.
Sorry, I'll say that again. I don't think I could be heard then. It is recommended that the executive proposes to council that leisure services are permanently insourced when the current contract terminates on the 31st of August 2020, and that the procurement process is abandoned. 2.2, officers effect an expedient transfer of staff and services into the council, bringing forward a detailed business plan by the 31st of December 2020, setting out governance options for the future operation of the service. A supplementary budget of up to £270,000 is allocated to allow the cost recovery agreement to be settled. A revenue budget of £1,300,000 £1,542,310 is allocated to cover the costs of the transfer and the relaunch of the services. A capital budget of £330,000 is allocated for the costs of reopening facilities in a COVID secure environment, IT systems and equipment, and rebranding. A capital budget of £1.5 million is allocated for the fitting out of St Sidwell's Point swimming pool and leisure complex. It is also recommended that the executive agrees to the staged reopening of leisure services from September 2020, when it is safe and cost effective to do so. Note the cost recovery payment of £337,833 agreed with Parkwood Leisure, which terminates the contract on the 31st of August 2020.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Can I ask the Director, Joe Yellen, to speak to the recommendations, please? Joe.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to draw members' attention to item 3 on the report, which sets out in high level the reasons for the recommendations. What we try to do in that section is set out a bit of a narrative about the events that have occurred, which of course were totally unexpected and significant in their impact on society as a whole, let alone just on our leisure services. But in setting out those reasons as to why this is being proposed to you at this time, I think what I'd really like to highlight is that the extreme volatility and uncertainty that some sectors of the economy still face, and particularly leisure, where, as people will be aware, there is still no official guidance from central government about how and when indoor leisure facilities can begin to reopen. And I think that's really to give you an idea of the complexity that's going to be involved in running these types of services in a post-COVID world. And we all know that whilst we're in a period of releasing lockdown, that at any point, not only locally but nationally, we could see resurgences of infection rates, which could lead to a reversal of some of the releasing of lockdown situations. So I think it's really, I want to be really clear with you that whilst there is some real positive messages in the paper about the ability of this recommendation, should members agree, for the council to take some more direct control over redeveloping these services for the future, they will be operating in a really unsettled landscape for possibly, a couple of years at the best case scenario. And I think I want to draw members' attention to the sections of the report where I refer to the work of UK Active. So that's in section 8 with a lot of detail about the analysis of why the market is going to be so volatile. And some of that is to do with the range of different types of providers that there are in the leisure market. So we range from a recent upsurge in budget gyms that we've seen around the country in the last 5 years or so. And we've seen that as a particular issue locally. I think it's probably fair to say that providers of budget gyms are going to really struggle to find a place in the new post-COVID market. Their model is based on packing people in, to having facilities that are very streamlined with having small numbers of staff. Now, these are absolutely the two things that the industry is now saying is going to have to be part of the new way of delivering leisure, which is going to have to be more staff to be able to manage the COVID secure issues, and also fewer people will be able to use facilities because there's going to have to be social distancing for some time to come, possibly until there is a vaccine for COVID, because by their very nature, indoor leisure facilities are places where transmission of viruses, and particularly something as virulent and unknown as COVID, that those are really are locations where there's still a lot of concern about our ability to be able to safely provide those facilities, even within social distancing. So I really just wanted to stress those issues with members, that even though taking control of the situation and bringing the services in-house is being positively recommended, doesn't mean that we're going to be outwards in terms of the challenges ahead. And to enable you to make that decision, the section that deals with the finances that underpins our ask of around £1.5 million revenue to be able to bring the services back in-house and to be able to run them for the remainder of this financial year. The modelling that we've done is based on the activity in 1819 that we validated as part of our normal contractual arrangements with the operator. And what we've done is we have then modelled that activity against the best intelligence that we have around what the impact of reopening in a post-COVID world would look like. And I've heavily referred to the UK Active Report, and it is referenced in my report, which has brought together data from a range of sources. So from Sport England, who are doing national surveys on a regular basis around behaviour change. So people are changing their habits about how they're exercising. So people that were regular gym users in the past, some of those are now exercising at home. There are some indications that a proportion of people will feel very uncomfortable about moving back into a traditional gym setting, for example. So the modelling that we've done to come up with the net budget figure is based on, at the moment, our best estimates of what the business might look like once we start to begin to be able to open those leisure centres. So again, there's a health warning with the data. It's the best estimate that we can put together using the best intelligence from the industry, but it is going to be volatile, it is going to fluctuate, and that's why we want to come back at the end of the year when we've had time to effect the transfer and begin to see how the landscape lies and what happens when we start to try to reopen the buildings. So many environmental impacts that we'll have to consider. So a key example, just to illustrate the complexities and the volatility for you, is that air conditioning, mechanical and engineering equipment is clearly very, very important. So in buildings where we have swimming pools, for example, there'll be a range of different types of equipment. Each single element of the mechanical and engineering inventory across all our sites will have to be individually tested by expert engineers to ensure that those air conditioning systems are going to be compliant with COVID secure guidance. We're still awaiting some of that industry-specific guidance to come. So whilst we're really optimistically putting forward a plan that would enable the centres to start to gradually reopen in a safe way from September, I think members need to be aware that we need to manage expectations, because that may not be possible once we get into the nitty-gritty of understanding all of the different dynamics within each of those buildings. Just to put a little bit more strategic context for members in terms of your decision making, we're clearly not alone as an authority with being faced with these difficulties. And there are weekly telephone calls that I participate in with local authorities from around the country, where everyone is grappling with the similar situations. We've already seen at least one operator go into liquidation who's under contract to a council, and I'm aware of other operators either handing in their contracts back to councils, or operators are handing in contracts for some of the perhaps most important facilities for the council, but those that make the least money for the operators. So I think taking into account that range of scenarios and the situation that we found ourselves in, that I have described in section 8 of the report, I think that the landscape has altered so much that this recommendation is being made on the basis that this is probably the best scenario for the council at this time, given the shifting sands, and that being able to take assertive action now probably limits potential loss and disintegration of the services to the council, and gives us an opportunity to be able to be directly managing a group of staff who are going to have to go through significant change to be able to run services for the future that are designed to achieve the outcomes that the council would want. I've tried to cover sort of the key strategic issues. There is a lot of detail in the report, and Chair, I'm in your hands in terms of if you'd like me to respond to any questions from members.
There'll be a chance for that in a moment. Councillor Pearson, do you want to contribute at this stage or come in later? What would you like to do?
I'll just say one thing, if I may, at this point that I think is important. So obviously, we were talking about this at scrutiny last week, and we're coming to the point of making a decision here at executive to recommend to council. And it's important, if you read part 13 of the report, were there any other options to what we're doing in terms of bringing this in-house? And yes, there were other options. But I think when you read that part, and I won't paraphrase them here, what you see is that those other options that we had contained a high level of risk for the council and for the council's finances. And so, just referring back to the question that we and the leader has been asked today about the finances of this, doing anything other than bringing it in-house also would have had big financial risks for the council. Now we're excited, I think, all about bringing this in-house. We can see all the potential benefit for the city, integrating this with our Let's Move branding and project and the Sport England work we're doing. But that's all great for the future. But right now we are trying to get the best deal for the city and make the right decisions for the people that work in that service, and to make sure that we do have a leisure service going forward. So I think that's just really important to know for members of the public and for members of the committee. Thank you.
Okay,
Chair.
thank you, Councillor Pearson. Does any member of the executive wish to contribute, add something? Councillor Gussain.
First, I welcome very much the insourcing proposal for the public leisure services in Exeter, and that till very recently, or till this minute, has been operated by Parkwood Leisure. I also commend the swift action taken by council officers that hope to enable these facilities to be reopened to the public as soon as it's safe to do so, and when it can meet COVID-19 secure guidelines, by taking the phased approach that is detailed in the report. I've got a short question. I could see that we will be, as council is going to be subsidizing the slow phased reopening of the leisure centres when it is safe to do so. My question is, for how long can the council sustain such subsidies? First. Second, are we hoping that the government is gonna give councils any support for the leisure sector, like it did with other sectors? Thank you.
Joe, I'll ask you to come in at the end. I'll take contributions if there are any other further contributions. Does anybody else wish to come in on this? Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to commend Councillor Pearson's observation that there isn't a good or a safe path through this, and I think Joe Yelland has identified the kind of issues that every operator in this sector is going to face. It's a good report. It makes for hard reading, but if we want a leisure service in Exeter, which we do, the best chance we have of providing it and providing it safely is to do it ourselves. So I'm really pleased that my fellow councillors have been able to take what is a brave step in the current climate and to commit to provide it ourselves, and we will do a damn good job of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there's nobody else, I'll Joe, can you just answer those two questions for me, please, or for us, please?
Certainly, Chair. So I think the first question was around the fact that the business plan that we've put forward in the paper does highlight that the subsidy would be in place for certainly the initial period. At the moment, it's hard to judge how long that level of subsidy will play out. And some of the answer to that will depend on some of those issues that I raised around the volatility in the market and the changing landscape around what happens in relation to COVID. Within the industry, certainly people are talking about a minimum of 2 years if nothing further were to happen from this point forward. And that's the dilemma for many councils who are being in a position where operators are asking for significant sums of money to enable the council to take on the risk of that uncertainty. So we have modelled for the first 18 months based on what we know now and what we'll be able to do. And my commitment in the paper is that we will bring back to members in December a further detailed assessment of those assumptions, and we'll have had time to really think more about what the future operating model will look like. And in doing that, we'll be looking at all of the opportunities that we can around how we can reduce that subsidy by looking quite innovatively at how those services could better meet the needs of communities. And I think just wanted to point out as well that the strategic work that was referred to by the leader in response to the question from the member of the public that we funded over the last few years actually does hold us in good stead, because you will recall that when members agreed the physical activity strategy last year and the built facilities strategy for leisure, that included significant development plans for the Wanford site and also the Exeter Arena site. And during the last few months, we have actually been able to accelerate the planning work that's going on around those two strategic projects. And we intend to bring forward business cases to members, hopefully before the end of this year. And I think that's really quite important for members to be aware of. So the fact that we did have a vision that members had forward, and we have been taking forward those plans, and we have got really strong partnerships with some of the national governing bodies, with Sport England. We're really optimistic about the medium to long-term proposals that we can bring forward. And it's the question is how well we're able to manage the volatility in that interim. It's also important for members to be aware that work has continued at both the Riverside refurbishment and on the new build at the flagship St Sidwell's Point, and both those facilities are on schedule to open at some point next year. And again, that gives us a really exciting platform on which to be launching effectively one fantastically refurbished facility and one amazing brand new facility that will encourage people into our services. We have got an opportunity with both of those to look at how the COVID secure issues will be managed from day one. So we're capitalising on that as we speak. So I think in terms of how long will those subsidies take place, certainly for the first year, maybe up to 2 years, but anything really could change in relation to that. But I do think the strategies that members have asked officers to take forward will actually be really helpful in reducing subsidies in the long term. The second part of your question really was about, is the government going to provide additional funding for leisure? And as far as I'm aware at this stage, there is no specific funding that has been identified for leisure. That doesn't mean that something won't come forward. There is a strong lobby from councils across the country, and particularly I'm involved in the lobby from Southwest councils who are writing very regularly to relevant ministers about the pressures that district councils and leisure operators face. So the lobby is ongoing, but at the moment, as far as I'm aware, there's nothing specific being allocated for leisure.
Thank you, Jo, and thank you. Yes, we could have an announcement at any moment. I would like to end this by saying, at the end of the day, I'd like to think we are making a brave, not just financial decision, but a brave political decision, and that is our role as politicians. I do not hide my pleasure in the fact that we will be bringing this service back in-house, where I believe it should be. And sometimes you have to look to a crisis to pull something out of it, and we have. And I would like to, on record now, thank all of the directors who've had to suffer a little bit with the demands that we were putting on them in relation to this. And also, and I want the public to realise that these proposals to bring this forward has been done in a matter of weeks. There were some easier options before us, and we chose to take these brave decisions. And when you think about what we want to do with the leisure consultation that we've done with the sports and what we want to do with the built facilities, Do you know what? We now have no further excuses, members of the executive. We only have ourselves to get the way in, to get in the way of. And no longer do we have to go through a third party to get that locker put right at the riverside, or the keys that are missing at the arena or wherever. We will be in complete control. We will be the people responsible and the people to blame. I have every confidence in the council in carrying out this. I think it's a brave decision. I do hope people in Exeter will support it. It's been, what, 10, possibly 20 years since it's been put in-house fully. And I hope that we will become, as in many other things that we do in this city, an exemplar amongst other local authorities on how to do it. So I'm quite happy to move these recommendations from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please?
Seconded, Chair.
Councillor Pearson. So I will, unless somebody is actively against this, I will assume that this is carried unanimously. Okay, so that's carried. Sharon, I've received an email from Councillor Andrew Ledbetter, who's having some IT difficulties and he can't get in. Can we record his apologies? Yes, Andrew is responsible for improving broadband in the Southwest, by the way. So we now move on to item 7, which is the overview of the general fund revenue budget, and the recommendations, if you can put them up on the screen. I don't propose to run all these through myself. They are there, they can be seen, and more importantly, David Hodgson is actually going to most probably talk to them. So rather than me repeating everything, David, can you run us through the recommendation and the standing of this report in today's context, please? David Hodgson.
Thank you, Chair. This is the report detailing the outturn position for the general fund revenue budget for 2019-20. In terms of the report, I'm not going to go through the detail of what's included, just to highlight a few key issues. Firstly, if we go to page 14 and the financial summary in 8.1, you can see that the outturn position is a transfer back to the general fund balance of £1.5 million. Now, at Q3, which was reported in April to yourselves, we were projecting taking 780,000 from the general fund balance. And the change is a result of 3 key issues that are positive and 1 negative, and they all relate. 3 out of the 4 relate to the COVID crisis and decisions we've taken to improve our financial position. Firstly, we have removed £1.6 million worth of revenue contributions to capital and replaced them with financing through capital receipts. Secondly, we've taken the decision to offset our statutory repayment of debt against voluntary overpayments that we've made in previous years. Thirdly, there's been an improved gain on the business rates pool, the Devon business rates pool across the whole area. And against that, we have had to increase bad debt provision as a result of the projected losses that we're anticipating as a result of the COVID-19 lockdown. So that's given us a much stronger position to end the financial year, which has helped us, as you will see later on in agenda item 11, and I'll come back to it then. The other key issues in the report and the key recommendations for council are further on in the report on page 24, and they relate to the transfer from earmarked reserves of £717,000. Alongside that, if you look at Appendix 3, you'll see that a number of reserves have been removed and transferred all into one new earmark reserve called 2020-21 budget, which again is preparation to help protect the council from some of the financial challenges we're facing in this financial year. as a result of the measures introduced to protect the public from coronavirus. Section 8.13 is the key. This is seeking a number of supplementary budgets to be added to this year's budget, and they total £1.2 million. They're detailed in Appendix 4. I'm pleased to note that only 118,000 of those come from the general fund working balance. The vast majority are set aside already in earmarked reserves. And also members should note on Appendix 4 that there's some £330,000 worth of budgets that were requested that we aren't proposing to put forward at this stage. However, if the need for those becomes essential, they may come forward in a future budget monitoring report to be approved. The rest of the report's for information, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, David. Are there any questions, contributions from the members? I can't see any, David. There's 7 parts to those recommendations. Thank you, Sharon. Is there anybody against those recommendations? Can they please indicate, please? Okay, in the absence of anybody against, I'm going to move them from the chair. I so move. Can I have somebody to second, please? Councillor Sutton. Thank you, Councillor Sutton. Thank you. Or, as I say, if there's nobody against, I will move them as accepted. Thank you. We now move on to item 8, which is the Capital Monitoring 2019-2020 and Revised Capital Programme for 2021 and future years. Again, there are 2 key recommendations there, but I'm going to ask David Hodgson to speak to them direct, please. David.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is the Outturn position in terms of the General Fund Capital Programme. Again, just highlight some of the key issues. Firstly, page 39, we've spent £40.6 million in the financial year. That's probably the biggest expenditure in many years on capital in a single year. And if you look at section 8.3, that sets out how that capital expenditure has been financed. I just want to draw your attention in section 8.4 to the balance on the capital receipts. We have 4.33 million available to us. These are now becoming critical because where we were planning to use revenue to finance some of the shorter dated assets, we're now transferring that to capital receipts. So a really good example, if you go back to the last report, one of the recommendations asked for 330,000 to support the bringing of leisure back in. That will be funded from capital receipts, so there'll be no borrowing against that because the types of assets that will be purchased are fairly short dates. The key section at the bottom of 42 and over onto 43 is further funding requests, and you'll see there's one further funding request which relates to Pinhost Station Road playing field upgrades, £250,000 fully funded from section 106, and council will be asked to approve that. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions on the Finance Officer's report or contributions? I can't see anybody. Anybody violently against accepting this report? Okay, I'll move it from the chair. Councillor Sutton to second.
Yes, seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. So, in the absence of anybody against, I'm going to move those as accepted from the chair. Thank you. Moving on to item 9, which is the 2019-2020 HRA monitoring Outturn report. David, can you talk us through these 2 recommendations, or three points of the recommendations on item 9, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is the outturn position in respect of the housing revenue account. Again, I'll just highlight the key issues in the report as relating to the recommendations. So in overall terms, performance on the HRA is a small surplus, adding back some additional funds to the HRA working balance, which currently stands at £10.239 million. That is all planned to be spent on the capital programme. As you're aware, with the HRA, much of the revenue from rents is used to fund capital programme to improve the assets, the existing assets. On page 61, section 8.4, the key request again of council is supplementary budgets totaling £657,000, which we're seeking to add to this year's budget. And just on page 62 to highlight that in terms of capital expenditure, £15.7 million has been spent this year in the housing revenue account, of which 7 million related to the existing stock and 8.5 million is investment in the provision of new council homes. 8.9 sets out the capital financing and how that's been financed. As you can see, none of that was from borrowing in this financial year. And again, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, David. Are there any questions or contributions from members of the executive? No, in the absence of that, I'm going to move that they're accepted from the chair unless somebody shouts now that they're violently opposed. Can I have a seconder, please?
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. So I'm going to move those as adopted from the chair. Thank you. We now move on to item 10, which is the Treasury Management 2019-2020 report. And again, there's a recommendation for us to note this. David, can you talk us through this, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll keep this very brief. This is a statutory report reporting on our performance in terms of Treasury management. And if you go to page 80, this sets out the performance in the year. We were estimating paying out a net £216,000. We actually received £97,000. So a really positive performance, underpinned by taking out the major loans at a very positive interest rate for ourselves. Again, most of the report is for information of how we've performed against the strategy that you set at the start of the financial year, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, David. Are there any questions or contributions from any members of the executive, please? No, and working on the assumption nobody are opposed, I'm going to move from the chair that they're adopted. A seconder, please, Rachel.
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. In that case, I move from the chair that those recommendations are accepted. We now move on to item 11, David, and I think you'll spend a bit more time explaining this one, and quite rightly so. And this is the emergency budget. And whereas you do monitoring reports all the time as the 151 officer, I'm not sure, certainly I've only been involved on the council 10 years this time, 4 years way back. I don't think I ever witnessed or been involved in an emergency budget before. And this is because part of the recommendation is that the council ensures to maintain a balanced budget, which results in the maintenance of the recommended minimum reserve levels. We have a duty to balance the budget. This is what we need to do. I'm going to ask David in a moment to explain, but before we start, I want to thank all the directors and all the portfolio holders who've been involved in bringing these measures together in order to take forward the fabric of the council. There has been an announcement that we've all been listening to, yet another announcement. We're waiting for the detail, and that's where the detail will come out shortly. And I'm adding a further recommendation to these recommendations. And that recommendation is that the executive recommends and council approves a budget of up to £1 million delegated to the Chief Executive in consultation with the leader and Chief Finance Officer. The budget will be used to fund urgent issues arising out of the response to COVID-19 and to offset the reductions in service budgets if required for urgent issues. The funds will be allocated from the income loss compensation announced by government, and I feel sure David will backfill much of that. So this is a detailed option, a very, very complicated matter. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Chair. I'll come back to the announcement from government towards the end. I'll just talk about how we've got to this position, and you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. This is a fairly unique issue. Undertaking an emergency budget is something that's extremely rare and arises out of the circumstances created by the lockdown and the impact that's had on the council's finances. So in terms of the council's finances, the impact is twofold. Firstly, we're spending more money that wasn't budgeted for at the start of the year, and that's on a range of issues which are set out on page 88, and total, our projection is £2.6 million. If I just quickly go through those, in terms of the Housing General Fund, we were required by the government to ensure that all the sleepers were off the streets and housed, and that obviously has a cost to it. £206,000 projected to the end of July. Continuing on from that, it will cost an additional roughly around £50,000 a month to maintain that provision. In terms of leisure, we obviously had agenda item 6, significant cost. There were costs already as a result of the restrictions and the closing of the leisure facilities, meant that we've agreed a cost recovery plan with the provider up until the end of their contract, and obviously all their income has been lost as well, so any income we were expecting we won't receive. In terms of waste management, we've implemented additional vehicles to support loaders, so they didn't all have to sit in a cab together, to enable an element of social distancing to take place. We set up a wellbeing hub to support the shielded and the vulnerable during lockdown. We spent additional money on PPE, and we've suffered other additional expenditure. So we're projecting total 2.62 million, sorry. In terms of income losses, this is the big area for the council. Lockdown meant that people haven't been using the car parks, they haven't been using trade waste. There's a risk to our commercial property because the businesses haven't been open, and our visitor attractions have been closed. And in total, we're projecting that we will lose £8.6 million of income over the financial year, and that will have a significant impact on our position. So in response to that, the government have recognised that in particular district councils have a reliance on income that's not just council tax and business rates, and they have announced a loss of income compensation scheme for local authorities. And the way it's going to work is they will take off the first 5% of your losses to reflect volatility in income, and then they've offered to pay 75 pence in the pound for income lost. Now, the detail hasn't come out yet. It's almost certain it will just be sales fees and charges. It won't cover commercial rent income in any way, shape or form. But we wait to see which of those income streams will be covered. But just to give you an indication from our last return to the government, to date, we have irrecoverable income losses in sales fees and charges totaling 2.33 million, and that would project into a recovery from the government of £1.66 million. Our projection for the year is a total irrecoverable loss of £5.5 million, which would translate into 3.9 million of compensation from the government. So that just gives you an indication of potentially the amounts that we may recover back. Very, very welcome, but clearly not enough to balance the budget on their own. Therefore, I think it's important that we continue to do this, not just for this year, but with a mind on the medium-term financial plan and the implications for that, because the position is looking significantly worse as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. So, as a council, we've come together, directors, portfolio holders, to identify a range of ways to address this gap. So the gap's £11.2 million, and we've sought to identify ways to cover that while still maintaining our general fund working balance above the minimum recommended level of £3 million. So if we go to page 90 at the bottom, section 8.5, you will see the list of options that we've put together to balance the budget. And as I mentioned in the first report that I covered today, the general fund overview, this work started working on the end of last year's by putting in place a number of options to make our financial position stronger to help us react to this. So first of all, it's important to note that already we've received £1.4 million of grant from the government to help offset. The government have also announced a further 500 million for local authorities to help with expenditure pressures. If I'm honest, I'm not expecting us to get a significant amount of that. I think the vast majority of that will probably go to the upper tier authorities, but we'll receive more from the loss of income. So we're proposing in the budget for this year, when approved in February, we're proposing to put £840,000 into the general fund balance. We're now proposing to take 1.2 million from the general fund working balance to help balance the budget. We've repurposed £2 million worth of earmarked reserves, and as I mentioned earlier, they're set out in Appendix 3 to the first report on the overview of the general fund budget earlier on the agenda. We've made use of the furlough scheme. Not many councils have done this, but we have made use of the government's furlough scheme. They're perfectly happy with that. They've been paying our claims, and we're projecting that we'll receive around £400,000 from that scheme. Directors and portfolio holders have worked together to identify £1.6 million worth of spending that can be stopped in year. It's important to note that these are temporary stops, they're not permanent arrangements. There are no redundancies as a result of the options being put forward, and they're things that if we get more money from the government, we can switch back on again. Hence the additional recommendation to set aside a budget of up to £1 million to help support any key issues that arise out of these savings. Strata, our IT company, have also recognised the position that affects not only this council, but the other two owners as well. And they've put forward savings of around 350,000, of which Exeter would receive £121,000. We're proposing to convert the maintenance of public toilets and play areas from the general fund to be funded by SIL, so not being funded by the taxpayer, council taxpayer, but being funded from community infrastructure levy, and that will save £160,000. Again, we're going to offset the statutory repayment of debt against previous voluntary overpayments. So we made voluntary overpayments of debt over the last 5 or 6 years. They total around £5 million. So we're perfectly within our rights to offset our current statutory repayment against those. That will save £640,000. Then, as I mentioned earlier, proposing to convert revenue that was going to be used to finance capital into capital receipts, and we'll do that again this year. and we'll remove the voluntary repayment of debt. Those two together total £1 million. And then, as members are aware, we successfully appealed against the business rate valuation of the museum. The Valuation Office then took us to appeal against that. We were successful in that appeal, and the Court of Appeal have finally thrown out their bid to appeal to a higher court, which has freed up an earmark reserve totaling £1.7 million for business rates at the museum. So that totals the £11.2 million and enables us to again balance the budget with a general fund working balance well above the £3 million. The rest of the report sets out the detail of that. I would like to highlight on page 94, section 8.7, that we still have a number of financial pressures that will come to bear in this financial year. Not least, the pay award hasn't yet been agreed nationally. It's a national negotiation between local government and the unions. The current rejected offer was 2.75%. We budgeted at 2%, so we know we're looking at something north of what we've got in the budget, and that could potentially cost us £325,000 more than we have in the budget this year. You'll have seen in the previous report we've recommended supplementary budgets, of which 118,000 will be funded from the general fund working balance. So that will be reduce the balance. We're also bringing leisure back in-house, and there could be additional costs, so it'll be important to have a contingency against that. The rough sleeper issue that I mentioned earlier could cost more than we set out in this report. And the additional capital programme projects that were set out in June executive, costing an additional 118,000, they could now be financed from the general fund working balance. And then there's a couple of further things where the costs are unknown, again relating back to the June executive. You'll note so far I haven't mentioned council tax and business rates. That's not because they're not affected. They are. We are currently receiving less than we would normally expect to in terms of payments of council tax and business rates. That impact will be felt next year, and that will have an ongoing impact on the medium-term financial plan. And I think it's critical for members to note that back in February, when we approved the budget, we were projecting savings being required of £3.7 million. We're now projecting that will be 5.8 million over the medium-term financial plan. So a significantly challenging position that we're in. So any funding that we get, we can look to help to support the medium-term financial plan, not just this financial year. In terms of the HRA, Joe mentioned earlier that leisure's one of the areas that government haven't yet decided on additional support for local authorities. I think it's very much being, as Joe said, being pressed to government that it's a serious issue for councils. The other glaring gap in support is the housing revenue account. Housing revenue accounts haven't had any support from government, and nothing has yet been mentioned. Again, District Council Network in particular is making the point very clearly that the housing revenue account isn't immune to this. There's twofold issue for the housing revenue account. Firstly, voids are costing more because we can't turn them around as quickly. They're costing more to clean. And secondly, rent arrears are increasing. So the housing revenue account as well has identified a range of measures that it can put in place in order to bring itself back to a balanced budget. I don't want to go on any further. I think I've spoken enough. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, David, and I do appreciate the work that you've put into this. And so we've got some contributions now, and the first one I'll go to is Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Dave Hodgson, the directors and the officers and the portfolio holders for coming up with this emergency budget in quick time, facing huge challenges. One of the things that I think illustrates the difficulties that you face with, if you actually look at page 88, for example, section 8.2.2, it struck me that, the officers acted immediately on the government recommendations to remove rough sleepers and put them into accommodation. We did that in good faith, and it cost us 180,000, and we received compensation of 24,000. So I think that illustrates the challenges that have been magnified right across the budgets, that we do something to the benefit of everybody, but yet we only get 13% refunded of the cost. I just wondered, Dave, have you got any comment on that?
Okay, Dave, if I'll wrap up a few more before you comment on that. I believe Councillor Sutton wishes to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would echo Councillor Williams's comments about just the phenomenal amount of work that's gone on to actually getting us to the position that we're looking at an incredibly comprehensive approach to the crisis that's been going on, and considering that this has been done by people working from home with kind of intermittent broadband and kind of not the everybody poring over spreadsheets together. It is just remarkable. And as Councillor Williams has said, what people see is the government announcements, and everybody goes, "Oh, that's great." So what they don't realise is that it's very rarely backed up with any guidance immediately. You have to wait days for the guidance, and then often the guidance is either confusing or contradictory. But the particular point I wanted to draw out was your additional recommendation, Chair, about putting aside an additional sum of money to meet any unforeseen contingencies. And goodness knows, this year we've had unforeseen contingencies. If anyone had said 12 months ago that we'd be sitting here 4 months after we produced a budget looking at an emergency budget of this magnitude, I think we'd all have thought that the person was kind of slightly deranged. But we are in this remarkable situation, and it's changing so rapidly that I think that's really wise move to actually make those contingencies, put it in place, so that if anything else comes up left field, as it almost certainly will, we don't have to wait for a cycle of meetings to actually make the changes and put into place the contingencies that need to be dealt with. So credit to everybody involved in this, and I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. Do we have? I've got to go between two screens here on mine. Do we have anybody else? Any other member? Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. I have to join my fellow councillors in thanking the directors and the other portfolio holders for the work that they've done in producing what is a very difficult budget, identifying the savings that needed to be made. I think one thing that I would support what Councillor Sutton said, when we hear the figures announced nationally about the support that's coming out to local councils and a variety of different other announcements, those figures sound huge in national figures. When you divide them down by the number of authorities in the country, it becomes a very much smaller number. And we are asked to do a lot. We assume, we had confidence, given the strength of statements from central government, that the actions we were being asked to take, that we took immediately, would be funded. And we're getting a fraction of it. And then we are faced with this kind of situation where we have to find the money from somewhere. And we have found it. Now, I did a presentation to the scrutiny committee about this area of work that Dave Hodgson has led on. And I think one thing that he said as we were preparing for the meeting that kind of stuck in my mind was we are one of the few councils who've taken this problem head on, and we have put together a budget to actually deal with the problem. We're not waiting for the government to bail us out. because I don't think they are intending to bail councils out. They make some big numbers as national statements. What reaches us is not good enough. We are finding the solution ourselves.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wood. Do I have anybody else wanting to come in to indicate? If not, I'll just, before I read that executive recommendation again, I just want to really say to people in Exeter and to people watching this, we've done an awful lot of work, although we have been given money to effectively hand out with business grants. I know Bindu and her team and Emma Morse and their team with the business grants, and there is still further support that we are doing. We are working with the businesses. We are working with our place board, and where we are engaging a lot of other agencies and businesses in Exeter, trying to help them with their recovery, whilst we're also trying to manage ours. It's very, very important. It's pleasing walking through Exeter today, you know, it is coming to life. It is busy, but it's not just about the money. It's about our city. And there may be some slight changes that many of the members of the public may witness. Bear with us. We have set a fund aside. We are not going to see the city go to rack and ruin. That's not what we're here for. We're very proud of our city. We want to, as I said, we're being bold. We want the council to approve us to bring in leisure facilities, to bring those staff over onto council terms and conditions. We're not making redundancies. We will order the pay rise, and we want to keep our frontline services going. I think if we can still try to aim to do all those things over the coming months, I think we will be doing a reasonable service to the people of Exeter. And I too, again, wish to thank the portfolio holders and also the directors. But just to remind you, after this year, we have a further 5.8 million over the following 3 years. So there is no easy options in being a councillor and running an authority such as this. So that's me. The additional recommendation to those recommendations are, you can see the 2 recommendations there. I'll read it now. It's that the executive recommends and council approves a budget up to 1 million delegated to the chief executive in consultation with the leader and chief finance officer. The budget will be used to fund urgent issues arising out of the response to COVID-19 and to offset the reductions in service budgets if required for urgent issues. The funds will be allocated from the income loss compensation announced by government. So I'm going to move that from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please?
Seconded, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Sutton. In the absence of any dissent, I'm going to move that from the chair as done. And just a reminder to members of the public, if they have access to ModGov or the council website, Appendix 5 of this report, the emergency budget briefing question and answer, is a simple 2-page document which does actually put in nice, clear language what the income has been, what the loss has been, and what we intend to do out of all that. And I would recommend people to take a look at that to see indeed what we are up to. So thank you for that. If that's agreed, we'll now move on to agenda item 12. And here we are. It's the review of the General Buller Statute. And the recommendations are that we would put to Scrutiny Programme Board to agree that work be undertaken by the relevant committee to investigate the continued appropriateness of the statute of General Buller and his horse biffing, and to act accordingly of its findings. So, Director John Paul, if you would like to introduce the document, please, and also you may want to make reference to a statement that you're preparing that we may put to post near the statue. So, John Paul, if you can lead on this, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the Black Lives Matter movement calls really simply for a level playing field for everyone in society. That means free from prejudice and inequality regardless of skin colour. It's a civil rights movement that's been going quite a while in America, that has escalated pretty quickly following the death of George Floyd back at the end of March. In the UK and in Exeter, there's been significant focus over recent months and weeks around the prominent statues on public land, and that they personify racism and the glorification of our colonial past. Exeter's actually got 6 statues of prominent white men who played their part in the city's history, and the Buller statue, complete with his horse, is the most conspicuous by way of location and also possibly by controversy. The statue itself was funded by the people of Exeter, and the purpose of this recommendation today is to ascertain whether or not its prominence is still appropriate to the people of Exeter. Since this was announced, there has been a huge amount of differing views as to what should happen to the statue. All those things have been recorded. And this report, very simply, as well as talking a little bit of the history about the statue, asked the scrutiny board to be the centre point for all that correspondence, and then to conduct a transparent, accessible and representative consultation into the matter, and then report back. Chair, as part of that as well, a temporary board is being prepared to be placed next to the statue, just whilst, if it's agreed today that the matter progresses, to talk a little bit about it. It'll explain the history of Buller. It'll also explain about Black Lives Matter and what the council is doing about it and this decision here today. It will also say how people can make their views to the scrutiny committee known. We've done that. Officers have been working with partners on the tackling racial harassment in the community group, and we've worked with our equality and diversity officer on it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John Paul. Yes, we'll get that up. Before we go into a discussion, I've received many ready emails. I've actually received a lot of handwritten letters, for and against, some blunt other than others. And I've passed all those on to Democratic Services. They're there in my office. I've also, somebody sent me a book. Not sure if you can see it, but Buller, a Scapegoat. And I've read some of it. I will also put that into the mix as part of the evidence. And of course, Buller was in Ireland when there was a lot of the rent evictions, and there was a Captain Boycott who was doing a lot of those evictions, hence the phrase boycott. So there's a little bit of history into the mix. I want to make it perfectly clear that we are not putting Redvers Buller on trial. We are not trying to rewrite history or wipe it away. What we need to do as a city is come to terms with our past. We are a rich city, very diverse city. We celebrate our diversity very well. We've got, I made a decision last year to have equalities and diversity as part of a portfolio and part of a member champion for this, to see what we do. We're going to start looking internally at ourselves as well. We need to. However, I just want to make that perfectly clear. We have not made any decision to pull it, to break it up, to do anything with it. And I'm just saying to people, write to us, communicate to us. And I think, JP, we have an email address where people, if they want to submit evidence, their story, their views, is to buller@exeter.gov.uk. This recommendation will move it to the scrutiny board, who will set up, I don't know, they will make a decision, not me. not the executive. We're not part of that. We are going to put it to the members to decide, to take their evidence how they want, and to bring back their recommendations. And then there will be a full, frank discussion on how we take that forward. So that's my bit for now. Does anybody wish to enter the discussion here? Councillor Hussain.
Yes, John Paul, thank you very much for a considered report. I have read the report, obviously, and I'm very appreciative of the work that has gone into it and the consideration of all points of view, etc. My question here is, of course, I welcome the proposed consultation. And my question is there a timeline associated with the process from consultation to evaluation and then agreed action, whatever that action is? Is there a timeline? Because it worries me that things sometimes can go on and on. I know, I appreciate we're in a very particular situation, which is the COVID situation. And things are moving very fast. And it's unusual. However, this particular issue has been with us for a very long time, and people come every now and then and protest and then trust the authorities to do something about it, etc. So, as I said, I really welcome the consultation and the idea of the process that has been put forward, but I would like to have some sort of timeline, if possible. Is that feasible? Thank you.
Yes, of course, Councillor. So I'm meeting with the scrutiny board should this progress here today on Thursday. They will set out the timeline and the start and the finish and how exactly we're going to report back. The email address that the chair just mentioned there will go live, and then we'll take part in publicity to make sure that people know exactly where they can make submissions, as well as all the ones that we've already had, and also the petitions on either side of the fence. The board that I referred to earlier, if it gets signed off, will be up within a week as well. So everything will be set up, and so by the end of the week we'll know that timeline.
Okay, thank you. Yes, indeed, it's been 115 years there, Councillor Hussain. I'm not proposing to wait 115 years or 15 months. But I want it to be done as soon as possible. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. Just like everybody else here, I've been receiving emails stating the case very strongly in favour of or against General Buller. And quoting all sorts of things that don't necessarily tie up with history or my understanding of it. So I just wanted to ask JP what the involvement would be with regard to fact-checking historian input into the process.
Yep, so we're quite lucky to have our ties to the University of Exeter at this stage. They've been instrumental in helping me fact-check a lot of this. We've got original archive. There are still some things that are disputed around Buller, the possession of it, as is mentioned in the report. So there's bits and pieces like that we've already identified that as part of the scrutiny process we'll need to make sure that they are properly fact-checked. We've got 3 very detailed guide texts around this. I believe Dr. Todd Gray has done a 4th, which went out on the media over the weekend, and also then the university itself is helping kind of fact check what we produce as well.
Sorry, Councillor Morse.
Yeah, I thought it was me that could. Yeah. Sort of to follow up on making sure that we have historian input, obviously the diversity of the people that we ask to come and give that information is really important, because at the moment, with the greatest respect to Dr. Todd Gray, who is a marvellous historian, he sort of represents one demographic very strongly. So I suppose my concern is that we ensure that the entire community of Exeter are consulted, and that we perhaps don't go to the same groups that we have in the past.
Yep, very much so. So in preparing the report itself, I've spoken to the Equality and Diversity Officer. The group that was helping look at this and is going to help with the sign to make sure that's a fair representation is a group called the Tackling Racial Harassment in the Community Group that has been set up for quite a while now. I'm trying to tap into them and have a look at the guidance, but I imagine that scrutiny will certainly be coming back to members themselves to make sure that voices of the community are very much heard as part of this process.
Okay, I really want scrutiny to take control of this. I want scrutiny to own this and not to be sort of for us to give it too many boundaries, if you know what I mean. I believe they will and they can. And what we will have to do is we will have the challenge, by the way, of dealing with the report when it comes to us as an executive, and then most probably we'll have to then put it to the full council. So it's not as if we have quite passed this ball across the park. It will be heading towards us again very soon, but I think we need to fact check it. It needs the appropriate time. I have an opinion is that we shouldn't take too long, Councillor Gussain. We need to show positive action to people, but it's just more than dealing with a statute, Black Lives Matter, and we mustn't forget that. We mustn't become obsessed as, you know, over this. We need to make sure that we get everybody's views. So is there anybody else that I've got? Councillor Wright wants to come in. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, firstly, as an executive member and also an Exeter citizen, I really welcome the report and the fact that we are wanting to do something. And as you said, it's not going to be us that decides what that something is. It's up to the scrutiny committee to then put this forward and work out how they're going to consult with people to get a decision on what happens with this statute. But I wanted to make a note of 10.3 to 10.6 of the report on the risk, because I do think that this is there is definitely a risk that we will just look at the statute and nothing else. And I think what's come out of the Black Lives Matter movement occurrences recently are that we should really look at what's happening on a day-to-day basis and hear from people in Exeter that want to tell us that and that may not have had the platform to do so before. So in order to be true allies to that, I think we really shouldn't stop with the statute decision. So I'm supporting what you said, Bill, Councillor Bialik, as well, that hopefully there will be a wider remit which comes out of this other than just looking at the statute. And the horse. I noticed that the horse's name is included. I've got no objection to the horse, personally, but it's interesting the horse is included. Thank you.
Okay, as I say, there is a temptation for us to want to try to do the work of the Scrutiny Programme Board in the scrutiny. I would suggest that we steer clear of that. We allow them to. My view is that they will bring a number of options, recommendations, and this is our dilemma. You know, if we do it too quick, we may miss quite a bit. But if we take it too long, then we're seen as procrastinating. So timing's all important, but I'm confident that the Programme Board in scrutiny can deal with it. It's going to be cross-party, it's not going to be one party, it's going to be apolitical, looking at the problem. And I think it will be an interesting debate to listen to what recommendations come forward. So if there's nobody else waiting to speak, and I don't believe there is, so I'm going to move those recommendations from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please?
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. And assuming nobody's against, I'm going to have that moved from the chair. Thank you. We now move on to agenda item 13, which is the Council Development Programme. And this, the recommendations full recommendations there to be moved by Councillor Wright, and then I will ask Bindu to come in and talk to the paper. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. The recommendations are that the executive recommend to Council that members note the Housing Revenue Account Development Programme progress update, that members approve additional capital budget provision of £3 million to allow urgent market opportunities to be pursued and secured where the committee reporting timescales do not allow for a full reporting process to be followed. The Council delegates authority to the Director in consultation with the Leader of the Council and the portfolio holder for Council Housing Development Services to spend the £3 million referred to in paragraph 2.1.2 above, where in-year market opportunities are identified. And members approve the acquisition of all three of the three-bedroomed houses in Anthony Road, Heathertree, Exeter, as part of the HRA development programme at a cost of £900,000.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Bindu, can you speak to your paper, please?
Thank you, Chair. In October 2019, as identified in the report, the Council approved the initial phase of the Council House Building Programme, which proposed the first 100 of the Council's ambitious plan to develop 500 homes in Exeter over what is now the next 9 years. And the budget that was identified for that first tranche was 18 million. So pleased to be able to update members that the delivery so far in progress is the delivery of 9 houses in Thorne Park Rise, 10 houses in Bovey-Moors Lanes, 21 flats in Hamlin Gardens, and 60 flats in Vaughan Road. In addition, the Council is developing Exeter's first extra care facility in partnership with the County Council, and this will deliver 53 extra care flats. All of the developments I've talked about so far, Chair, have been built to Passive House standard and delivered by the Council's in-house housing team with a significant amount of support from the Council's development company, Exeter City Living. We also have 17 renewed properties as part of our Langs redevelopment programme, bringing a total of 170 properties in this first tranche of development. So the Council is currently working to scope the second phase of our social and affordable housing programme, and we continue in this to work alongside Exeter City Living, and we hope to be able to bring this programme proposed to members later this year. As is clear with the Anthony Road properties, the Executive is being asked to support the purchase of this evening. From time to time, opportunities might arise for the Council to secure development opportunities, and we need to respond perhaps more quickly and nimbly than we usually can with the existing processes in place. And so we're asking for funds to be made available for release in consultation as indicated in the recommendation, and we would of course subsequently come and update members, and the amount for this, as already been said, is 3 million. Returning, if I may, to the 3 Anthony Road properties, Chair. Originally, these were intended for open market sale and were offered to the Council on the 1st of April by ECL. Now, these properties are actually adjacent to the Council's existing properties at North Lawn Court, and we're delighted that they've been built to very high specification and again to Passive House standard. So there are good local links to schools, shops and health facilities, as well as public transport links, which all obviously continue to support the Council's ambition around carbon neutrality. And so officers feel that this would be a positive addition to the Council's housing stock. The cost of these, as already been said, is 900,000, and this, alongside with the proposed 3 million fund, will be met from additional borrowing. If I may, Chair, one further point that I wanted to raise on council housing development is that members may be aware that today the Chancellor announced a 3 billion green package of funding. And as part of that, 50 million has been made available to pilot innovative schemes to retrofit social housing at scale. And some of the measures that have been described are insulation, double glazing, and heat pumps. Subject, of course, as always, Chair, to hearing the details of that funding that will be made available. I suggest that the City Council is well placed to pursue a funding proposal to government in the near future, depending, of course, on member support for this. And this is because we believe that perhaps ahead of some other councils, we have already set a baseline position for our own housing stock, and we are finalising a proof of concept proposal which could deliver scale and pace. Your housing service, Chair, has identified the least efficient, energy efficient properties in our stock and have begun to develop programs of work to retrofit our stock, including identifying our existing contractors who might help us to deliver this work. The leader and portfolio holder and the strategic management team are already aware of this work. And once we finalise our proposals, Chair, we look forward to sharing it more widely with members. That's all I have to say. Happy, of course, Chair, to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Bindu. Councillor Wright, would you like to come in at this stage, or?
I don't have much more to add. I think Bindu has summed that up very well, other than, yes, I was very excited, if that is the word I can use, with the current government to hear that they are putting money into green housing. So that, as Bindu has said, I think there's a really good opportunity for us there, because we already have a lot of work done, almost in completion, at being able to put forward the bid for the funding there. So that is good extra news, I think, hopefully.
Okay. Do we have any member of the executive who wishing to make a contribution or ask a question? Okay, just before I put it to the vote, all I will say to this, if you read it, I'm pleased that we've got a programme that is coming forward in our HRA. It's one of the important arms, together with our other arm of our development company. They're working together. Each arm of the same body, all moving in the same direction. And I think that's so important. So I'm going to move those recommendations, which are coming up on the screen. Can I have a seconder, please?
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. If there's nobody against those, I'm going to move them from the chair as accepted. Thank you. We now move on to item 14, which is the introduction of a Council Housing and Development Advisory Board. And I'm going to ask Councillor Laura Wright to move the recommendations, followed by Bindu to talk to the document. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. So the recommendations are that the Executive recommends to Council for approval the creation of a Council Housing Development Advisory Board with the composition and terms of reference detailed in sections 9 and 10 of this report. That the terms of reference set out in paragraph 9 are agreed, and that the Council's constitution be amended accordingly. That the independent remuneration panel on members' allowances be requested to consider whether the position of chair of the Council Housing Development Advisory Board would attract a special responsibility allowance, an SRA, and recommend this to Council accordingly. And that Executive recommend to Council a budget of up to £16,000 to cover the cost of an additional resource if required, and a budget of up to £10,000 for the special responsibility allowance if recommended.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Bindu, would you like to talk to the paper, please?
Thank you, Chair. So as demonstrated in the previous report, the council housing area represents a major area of business for the council. So with an annual income of 20 million and an asset base with a use value of over 240 million. Of equal importance, of course, is that we provide homes for local people and work with our residents to develop sustainable communities and neighbourhoods. So with the council's house building programme underway, our responsibilities as a local landlord and our various plans in terms of the improvement of our council stock and the way that we manage that. The portfolio holder and officers feel that now is the right time, in light of the recent review of scrutiny that's taken place in the council, that we now focus on enhancing the scrutiny and oversight of council housing, not only in terms of the management of that housing, but of course our development proposals as well. And it gives us an opportunity, if you like, for external, professional, constructive challenge. So the council is regulated, as are in fact other registered social landlords, by the regulator of social housing, and that sets and monitors standards. Having a board that's in place to support the council in an advisory capacity to help maintain those standards is, I believe, in line with best practice. Working alongside elected members on the board, the proposal is to include independent board members who will bring a range of expertise across social housing. Crucial to this, of course, is the voice of our tenants, and this is reflected, Chair, in the proposed membership. There are terms of reference for your consideration identified in section 9.1 of the report, Chair. Other than that, happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Bindu. Is there any member of the executive or at this stage, sorry, Councillor Wright, would you like to come in before I go to the executive?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to say that this has been discussed before to take back ideas about this board, and quite a lot of work has gone into how this board should be set up. Lots of sort of workshopping of ideas, but also paying absolute heed to current legislation. So part of it is what we have to do, as Bindu said, to comply with legislation, and then part of it is sort of how we think we should do it as well, to reflect best practice.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Hussain.
I just wanted to say that I particularly welcome the scrutiny group of tenants that are supposed to ask questions to the board and be consulted. I think that is really a good innovation or a good thing to do. I think it's I welcome that in particular. The only thing is, isn't it? Well, I was counting how many people are in that board. Is that okay to have about 20 people? Is that right?
Hey?
18 to 20 people on the board?
No, I don't believe so. Bindu,
well,
sorry, you carry on, and Bindu will answer that. Carry on, Councillor.
Sorry, when I counted yeah, it's just a quick counting when I was looking who is going to be included on the board, and it's anywhere between 18 and 20. Maybe I'm mistaken. I just want some clarification of that. Thank you.
Okay, let's find out in a moment. I'll ask Bindu to come in at the end on that one. Is there anybody else wishes to ask a question or make a contribution? No? Okay, Bindu, can you tell us how big this is going to be?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Hussain is right that in 10.1 and 10.2 we identified the potential people that might be part of that board. So obviously we have 5 elected members to start with. We want to include, as I said, a service user, and then we had in mind, again, just to complement the 5 elected members, that we have 5 external advisors. The responsible director, obviously me at the moment, and other appropriate officers to add to that. And then what we're looking for is to have, if you like, support, as we typically would for other committees, although of course this is an advisory board, which is where you'd want someone with an expert in the law, finance, and so on. So I take your point. 18 does seem a large number, Councillor Hussain. One of the things I think that we're used to doing is trying something out and learning what we need to do and make changes if we need to. So this is our starter for 10, and to be honest, because it's a new endeavour, I'm minded to recommend that we go with this for the meantime and obviously review it. And if we get to a stage that we feel that the business is perhaps not being efficiently conducted because of the membership, we can always review. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bindu. Actually, it's a starter for 18, isn't it? And the clue The clue is actually in the title of this board, advisory. Obviously, you don't set boards up to totally ignore them, but they are an advisory board, and democracy is a thing whereby you have to get the involvement. But I share what Bindu says. We should give it a go and see how it is. So if there's no further contributions, I'll put those recommendations in the paper to us, which are those. Do I have a seconder, please?
Yeah, seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Rachel. I can't see any dissenting hands. In the absence of any dissent, I'm going to move them from the chair as accepted. We now move on to item 15, which is the Greater Exeter Strategic Plan, the draft policies and site options consultation. And so I'm going to ask Councillor Bob Fole to introduce his recommendations, and then again Bindu to talk to the paper. Councillor Fole.
Thank you, Chair. Recommendations for the Executive are: number one, that the guest draft policies and site options consultation document attached at Appendix A is approved for public consultation. Secondly, that the guest draft policies and site options sustainability appraisal report attached to the Appendices B1 and B2 is approved for public consultation. Thirdly, that the initial habitat regulations assessment report attached at Appendix C is approved for public consultation. And fourth, that the content and conclusion of the guest equality impact assessment screening report attached at Appendix E are noted. Fifthly, delegated authority is given to the leader in consultation with the portfolio holder and chief executive and growth director to agree changes to the above documents arising from decisions by other guest authorities before they are published for consultation. And number six, that a call for sites process to be held alongside the consultation on the guest draft policies and site options document is approved. And number seven, that the content of the consultation statement for the 2017 Greater Exeter Strategic Plan issues consultation attached to the Appendix D is noted. There's a further recommendation for Council that the guest team is brought up to 8 full-time equivalent members of staff, and that local planning authority staff resources are provided equitably to the team through equalisation arrangements. Subject to future confirmation of the additional guest staff roles that will be required, for Exeter City Council, this is likely to equate to a total contribution of approximately £62,000 per annum towards staff costs, or if you like, an additional £33,330 per annum on top of existing staff contributions.
Thank you, Councillor Fole. Now, your job now, Bindu, is to explain a 2 or 3 year guest process and the detail of all this in a few sentences, which we all understand, and more importantly, the public can get a handle to. Bindu.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to say that I'll shortly be delegating that task to George Marshall from the guest team to take you through a presentation which is being shared with all of the other guest constituent councils. What I will say just by way of summary is the Greater Exeter Councils are Exeter City Council, East Devon District Council, Teignbridge District Council, Mid Devon District Council, and together with Devon County Council as the key infrastructure provider and the Minerals and Waste Planning Authority. And these councils formally agreed, as you said, quite a while ago, back in 2016, to prepare a joint statutory plan. And the idea is that each council's local development scheme will then incorporate the GESP accordingly. So the draft for approval, and this is just, as has been said, Chair, these are to approve these documents to go out to consultation. And of course, the results of that consultation will come back to each individual council. This is being presented to each constituent council of GESP, and the City Council is first. George, as I said, will take you through a short presentation, and it's the same presentation that's been showed across the various councils, which will take members succinctly through the development process for the GESP. I would just flag the point, Chair, which has already been said in the recommendations, that there is a resource implication for the preparation of GEST, and that has already been built into the Council's medium-term financial plan. I would intend now, Chair, to pass over to George Marshall, if that's okay with you.
So George is going to give us a presentation. Just to say, Bindu, I picked up you said Greater Exeter District Council. Has there been a reorganisation I've not been made aware of? I
meant to say the council's considering the Greater Exeter area, Chair.
Thank you. That's okay. We're all getting nervous about that, as you know. So, George, if you can, in understandable language, please present this to us, that will be a great benefit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will endeavour to share my screen. So just bear with me while I set up the presentation. So hopefully you can see a presentation on your screens now, which starts by describing and exploring what the GEST is as a document. So it will be the strategic planning framework for the 4 districts in the southeast of the county. So Exeter City within the centre, but including East Devon, Mid Devon and Teignbridge districts. As Bindu has alluded to, it's being prepared jointly by the four local planning authorities with input from DCC with its statutory duties. And it will cover the plan period from 2020 to 2040, so a fairly standard 20-year plan period for the document. First question, why is it being prepared? Why are the councils preparing it? In a sense, this comes down to local geography and the local functioning area, which covers a number of local administrative boundaries. So we have a very large travel to work area focusing on Exeter. We have a similarly large economic area and then a housing market area. And these 3 functioning areas cover fairly neatly the city council and 3 surrounding district council boundaries. But equally, if you're working together on a day-to-day basis, it allows the authorities to address some of these technical issues on a very sort of comprehensive and efficient basis, and it allows you to do that very effectively, which enables you to tick off your duty to cooperate every council has to demonstrate when it's preparing a plan. Central government is also moving towards encouraging joint planning. In previous years, there have been different guises of joint planning. The most notable and most recent being regional strategies, but since then there hasn't been such a level of planning, and so joint arrangements allow that to take place very helpfully. I think lastly, it enables the authorities to work together to give the area, as we've put it here, greater clout with government, and that's really helpful when we're trying to secure funding for infrastructure, funding to improve the quality of development, and to actually support the authorities in preparing their local plans. So 4 councils working together with support of the county council has a very strong voice with government, and there's a significant benefit on that basis as well. In terms of where the Greater Exeter strategic plan sits within the other policies locally, we have a diagram here which explains that you'll have the Greater Exeter strategic plan as a higher level of document, but it will also sit alongside local plans, which will continue to have a very important role. So the Greater Exeter strategic plan won't do everything. It will cover some high-level strategic policies and some of the large development sites, but there'll be a very strong role in policy making for local plans. And similarly, neighbourhood plans at the very local level, or neighbourhood forums, town and parish councils. So you will have a very kind of strong tiered system whereby 3 layers of plan fit together to produce a comprehensive framework, and the community would be involved in the preparation of all of those. I've slightly touched on this already, but what will the GESP contain? Because it's covering a large geographic area, it won't cover all planning policy matters. It will cover the strategic issues which can be dealt with better on a larger scale. So we've included some of those here, and these reflect the chapters within the draft consultation document which is being discussed this evening. So we're talking about matters such as climate change and the climate emergency, prosperity, employment and jobs, the homes that we need for our local communities, movement and communication, so that the transport and digital infrastructure requirements associated with the needs of the local area, some of the key nature policies, so we're looking at woodland creation, we're looking at valley parks, and then finally quality places and infrastructure. We're aware that the quality of development is dependent on design, but also on infrastructure delivery in a timely manner, and therefore it's felt that that's a strategic matter which can be dealt with very comprehensively at a wider than local area, geography, if you like. In terms of housing and development sites, it is looking to allocate land for the strategic scale development for both housing and employment across the area. So as I said, local plans will still have room to allocate smaller sites, but the large scale developments will be allocated through the GESP process. So as per the number of recommendations before you, there are a number of documents being discussed and being considered here. So we have the consultation document itself. We also have then a series of evidence-based reports which are required to go alongside the plan as it develops. So first of all is the sustainability appraisal, which considers and assesses the sustainability credentials of the various elements of the plan as it moves forward. We have an initial habitat regulations report, which again considers the various elements of the consultation document in the context of the potential impacts that those elements could have on the European wildlife sites in the area, so for example the ex-estuary. We have something called the issues consultation statement. This document explores the issues which were raised and the responses provided at the previous GESP consultation, which was held in 2017, and that was called the issues consultation. So we've documented the responses we received through that process and responded to those in the consultation statement. And then we also have an equality impact assessment, which considers the various elements of the consultation document and the potential impact on those on protected groups. So that those documents are available alongside the main consultation document for approval for consultation. I think it's worth pointing out that on the Greater Exeter Strategic Plan website, there's a raft of other evidence available, which has been put together through the preparation of the plan to date. So the recommendation is in relation to holding a consultation in September on the draft policies and site options version of the GESP. But what will the consultation look like? So associated with the GESP, there is something called a joint statement of community involvement, which sets out the way in which the authorities will jointly consult consistently on the GESP. So this goes alongside the existing consultation arrangements and community statements of community involvement, which the planning authorities already have. This joint statement of community involvement was consulted on previously in 2017, and it's been updated to reflect commentary received during that process. And that's actually being discussed as a separate executive report as the next item on the agenda this evening. I think in updating that and reviewing it, the team has been mindful of the emerging COVID-19 situation, and we've endeavoured to include flexibility in that statement of community involvement to enable full and meaningful consultation, irrespective of the COVID-19 pandemic and how that may progress over time. And we've looked quite strongly towards the work which Teignbridge District have done on their local plan earlier this year, whereby they've held a full consultation on a planning document using really innovative and transparent and accessible social media. And I think we would look to learn from some of the lessons that Teignbridge have shown us there. Just in terms of the preparation of the plan, where it's been and where it will go in future. I've mentioned that in 2017 there was a joint consultation on the issues stage of the Greater Exeter Strategic Plan, which was a very high level, short consultation, just exploring the main issues which the document could address. This consultation document before you this evening is called the Draft Policies and Site Options Consultation Document. And I think the name is hopefully very clear. It has a series of draft policies within it for consultation, and then a large number of site options. So subject to approval, that would be subject to an 8-week consultation from September the 21st to November the 16th this year. And then that consultation and the responses we receive will inform the preparation of the plan going forward. So there will be additional consultation following this one, subject to approval. So it would develop towards a draft plan or a publication document, which would provide additional engagement opportunities. The timetable is set out in the local development scheme, which sets out the timetabling of planning policy documents a local authority is providing. And that local development scheme is being reviewed. We've had to delay the suggested dates for the draft policies and site options consultation as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we need to take that on board in updating that local development scheme timetable. In doing so, we're taking some advice and are having ongoing discussions with PINS, the Planning Inspectorate, in terms of some of the lessons learned from other authorities in the local area and more widely. In terms of the governance and the preparation of the plan, we've already mentioned we have a Greater Exeter Strategic Plan team, which includes officers from the 4 local planning authorities and the County Council. We also have a project advisory and assurance group, which is made up of the heads of planning from the 5 authorities. And we also meet regularly with the principals of those authorities, the chief executives and the directors, but also Homes England and the local enterprise partnership. In terms of local authority member involvement, we have 2 forums through which we have prepared the plan thus far. The first is something called the Member Reference Forum, which has 10 councillors from each local planning authority sitting on it. And there have been a large number of meetings on the various elements of the plan as that has progressed. But we also meet at least quarterly with the leaders and portfolio holders from each of the local planning authorities and the county council to ensure there's the strategic steer on the document. That member engagement will continue going forward. So as we've talked about this evening, the consultation document is going before committees in July and August. It's going to each of the 4 local planning authority committees over the next 6 weeks or so. If there are minor amendments which need to be made, one of the recommendations in the paper is for the leaders to be able to agree such recommendations, and there would be a leadership meeting towards the end of August on the 28th to discuss any minor amendments which are required. Further engagement will take place during the consultation in September and November, and of course members are most welcome to take part in that. And I know the team is already fielding some questions at the moment. And then, as I said, there will be further opportunities to shape the plan post-consultation through the Member Reference Forum and the leadership meetings, but also importantly, significant further public consultation as the plan moves forwards in a formal sense. So hopefully that's given a helpful oversight, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, George. There you go. The world of planning, everybody, is an important issue. By the way, I'm getting emails already, and I'm advising people to use the consultation process, and that's what we need to do. Does any member of the executive wish to either ask a question or make a contribution? Can you indicate, please? Councillor Morse. I'll come to you, Councillor Fowle, at the end. You may be able to link it all together. Councillor Morse.
I think mine's a statement to follow up what you've just said, because at the 11th hour, I've received a representation from somebody that I really haven't had time to read. So I'm very sorry, but if you send something that close to a meeting, we haven't always got time to get that in. But generally asking for things to be removed from the process. And having listened to that and what was said before and what was said by Bindu, I think if we were counting how many times consultation was said, it may have been in the word like the hundreds. So it's just to reiterate the point you were making, that's the point of the consultation, to see if all of those places should be in it. And it's far wider ranging than just somebody sending me an email a couple of days or a couple of hours before a meeting. It's about everyone getting to have their say. So just encourage those people that want to contact us and not want areas added or want areas added, to just engage with that consultation process, because, clearly that's what it is based on what we've been listening to.
Thank you, Councillor Morse. Is there anybody else who wants to come in? Yes, and just following up with what Councillor Morse says, there's everybody is on to me, understandably, as many of you, take this out, put that in, or change this. At the end of the day, landowners have put their sites up for consideration. We have a duty to look at that. If we were to unilaterally before dismiss them, I think they would be quite entitled to say that you've had a prejudiced view. We need to look at all of this. These are major sites, by the way, not the smallest sites, which will still come forward through the normal planning process. We need to do this. Interesting to note, by the way, that the Livable Exeter 8 sites are contained within the GES. If people want to know what the Livable Exeter board is all about, what's it doing, there you go. It's in the planning process. We're putting those sites in there. That's where we need to hear the consultation, not on detail, but on the plans in general. You're quite right, Councillor Morse. So if there's nobody else, I mean, this is a big issue, and it's an issue that we are going to come back to, but we do need the bigger strategic view. I'm going to ask Councillor Fowle to come in. Councillor Fowle.
Thank you, Chair. I think the recommendations, particularly number 5 and number 8, need to be considered against the backdrop of last May's elections, where we saw a change of leadership in Mid Devon, East Devon, and in Timbridge. And of course, since then, we've seen the mass resignation of the East Devon board. So there's been a lack of joined up sort of continuity thinking there. And I'm aware that Exeter has been committed to this programme for a long time with a stable administration. So the ability of the leader and portfolio holder and chief executive and growth director to agree changes depending on the decisions of the other local authorities is an important one to have in there, because there is a financial consideration. And while we've remained committed, if the other authorities decide they're not committed, it may well be that that £33,000 might be used in other ways to support planning, possibly the local plan. So I'd like to know that I'm really sure that there's an appetite, a will, and a commitment by all 4 authorities to fully support this guest before we commit a shed load more of money. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you. We're in a position at the moment, Councillor Fole. This is our decision. We will make our decision. We will go forward on our decision. We are not making it on the basis of what others are doing at this moment in time. If whatever decisions they make, we will have to deal with the consequences. We need to build a local plan. We need homes in Exeter for people in Exeter. We as a political party are committed to doing just that, but we want to do it in a responsible way, in a sound way. And that's what we've got through Livable Exeter. And you're quite right. We have to make decisions. We'd much rather work in a joined up fashion, but we will work whatever we are presented with, and I do get that.
Absolutely.
So if, in the absence of anybody else, I'm going to put those recommendations to us. Can I have a seconder, please?
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. Are we all okay with the recommendations? Good, thank you. And just again, for members of the public who may be watching, the City Council is committed to the GESP process. That does not mean any of the sites in particular. We want to hear through the consultation process, and then obviously decisions will be made. So I don't want people to think because we've approved the consultation process, and therefore we've approved all those sites. We have just not done that at the moment. I just want to make that perfectly clear. And of course, how we go forward is the purpose of item 16, which is the Greater Exeter Strategic Plan, the joint statement of community involvement. And again, Councillor Bob Fole to move the 2 recommendations, please.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, it's about the statements of community involvement, and there's 2 recommendations. Firstly, that Executive approves the contents of the joint SCI that has been prepared for the Greater Exeter Strategic Plan, and secondly, that Executive gives delegated authority to the leader in consultation with the portfolio holder and Chief Executive to agree changes to the joint SCA arising from decisions by the other Greater Exeter local planning authorities, and to approve it as a local development document, noting that it will apply jointly to East Devon District, Exeter City, Mid Devon District and Timbridge District Councils.
Thank you. Bindu.
Thank you,
This
Chair.
one won't take long, will it?
No, just very briefly, as I think George has already alluded to, statements of community involvement are produced by local planning authorities to explain how we're going to involve the public in planning matters. This specific consultation is about a joint SCI that will cover the guest. There is no requirement statutorily to consult on the SCI, but it in itself was consulted on previously in the guest process, and the report identifies for members, Chair, where some of the outcome of that consultation has been taken into account in moving to the document that you have as your appendix. Nothing further to add, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further contributions people need to make on this? It's quite self-explanatory on what we're going to do. If that is the case, I'm going to move the recommendations from the chair. Do I have a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. And looking at my screen, I see no dissent. So I will suggest that is being agreed. That ends part one of our meeting, where we say goodbye to the members of the public. And we only had one reference to, can you hear me? No references to unmute. And I think we are moving in the right direction. Thank you all for tuning in. And the full council is on the 21st of July. And I hope you all gained quite a lot from this meeting. Thank you very much.